Hello everyone, my name is Josh and this is Whimsical and Interesting Musings, and today we are talking about Series 3 of Inside Number 9. And if I remember correctly, we are on the very start of this particular series, and I'll probably do another video on Inside Number 9 today, but I'm going to do a third video. I know I said I was going to do 2 videos yesterday, but because of a nice surprise that I had later on today, I actually kind of forwent recording any more videos because I wanted to spend time with my family. So yeah, I actually did say that I was going to publish 2 videos yesterday, but I ended up just publishing one, which is my review of the 1992 cult classic Bad Lieutenant starring Harvey Keitel. And if you want to see that review, it's down in the J icon just below the descriptions, just above the description. So if you want to check that out and hear my thoughts on that particular film, which is a great film by the way, I would highly recommend checking out that video and leaving a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really do appreciate it, thank you. And now, without further ado, let's get on with this video. So the first episode in this lineup of particular episodes of Inside Number 9 is The Devil of Christmas. Now this one I did leave an honourable mention for because it is a really good episode, and especially if you are a fan of TV shows from the 70s or films from the 1970s like I am, films like Don't Look Now, or TV shows like Tales from the Unexpected, Minder, or, Armchair Thriller, which is, of course, the inspiration for Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith in creating this episode. And the whole entire origin of it was they just wanted to do a story on Krampus, the Christmas demon, and they basically have this very interesting psychological thriller at the heart of it. But what really makes this particular episode interesting is how it's shot and how it looks, because a lot of this episode is pretty much done with the old 1970s aesthetic, and how they achieved this was a production manager for the BBC actually was able to get the cameras, the old 70s cameras, out of storage from the BBC archives and actually put them to good use by having a 3-camera setup and actually making sure that the lighting was correct, how the scenery was decorated was correct, and how even the makeup on the characters' faces recorded well in the light of those cameras when they were recording the episode. So that to me was a very interesting little tidbit. But what really is interesting about this episode is how it's set up. At first, you think it's going to be a very straightforward story about a family who go to a chalet in the Austrian mountains. And very slowly they're haunted by a strange presence who they believe to be Krampus. But as the story goes on, it begins to get even more psychological, and the main character of Katie, played by Jessica, I've forgotten her name, I'll look it up very quickly, played by Jessica Raine. She's a character who very slowly starts to feel, is she a little bit out of her depth being a part of this family, because she is basically the new girlfriend for Pemberton's character, John, I think his name is. I've forgotten his name. Sorry, I do apologise if I'm butchering these names. But yeah, he pretty much she pretty much feels out of her element. She feels out of her depth because she's obviously the new girlfriend, the new mum for the son character, and Rula Linsky is kind of just the very, stubborn, very kind of, judgmental mother-in-law kind of thing. And it's really hilarious because she always plays those types of characters very well in a lot of different shows. I mean, she's very famously been on, for me anyway, on Coronation Street as a recurring character for Gail and for Gail and her mother. And I think that's very good. My memory is like a sieve today, honestly. But I personally really do like the actors in this. They do a very good job of really kind of selling the melodrama of the whole thing. But it actually feels like a very legitimate 1970s type show, and an idea of this type of film or TV show, because a lot of what happens in it is very over the top. But throughout the series, we hear a strange voice, and this voice is none other than Derek Jacoby, a Shakespearean actor British Shakespearean actor extraordinaire and gay icon. He famously, is an openly gay man, and I just felt like him starring in this as a director who's trying to talk about his craft was actually really funny. But not only that, but he's also a fabulous actor, and he recently starred alongside Ian McKellen, a childhood friend and a very good, collaborator, in a sitcom called Vicious about an elderly gay couple, and I absolutely love it. If you love, those classical sitcoms where the characters are constantly, shouting back, constantly giving each other sly little jabs and saying all sorts of, bitter and very hostile things, but in the meantime, they actually really love each other, and they have crazy neighbours. I would definitely recommend that show. It was created by Mark Ravenhill, who's a famous playwright. But yeah, go and check that show out if you're a huge fan of both Derek Jacoby and Sarah McKellen. My screen nearly went blank there. But yeah, this episode is really good. The director's commentary is a very interesting touch, because at first you're thinking to yourself, excuse me, oh, this is, clearly a director's commentary for a DVD. This is clearly a classic story that they're telling, and, this is the director, giving his insight, his scoop for the whole thing. And throughout the whole thing, you're kind of led to play that it's played relatively straight. But throughout the production, various little things start to go wrong, like actors would miss their marks, and various actors would even snub their lines at some points, or get lines wrong, or miss a cue, or whatever. And it begins to get very odd. And then, of course, there's even touches like, boom mics showing up in the shot when, when it's cutting to a certain character's perspective. And I thought that was really hilarious. Like, stuff like that really does add to the charm of this particular episode. But as the series goes on, as this particular film goes on, weird stuff starts to happen. Like, one of the there's a particular trick that Krampus does where he puts kindling in one person's shoe, and that's basically a sign that he's coming close and he's coming to get you if you're a bad child. And then, of course, it gets even more sinister with the characters, seeing the son basically staying up all night and saying his prayers, and his grandmother, Rula Linsky, is pretty much saying you need to get to bed, you need to sleep tight, otherwise Santa won't come in the morning, things like that. So they're constantly trying to keep him, lighthearted and upbeat, but there's constantly this sinister supernatural presence going out throughout the duration of the story. But what's very clever about it is you don't really know if it's actually Krampus who's doing all of this, or whether something sinister, much more sinister and much more real, is going on throughout the production, throughout this entire film that's being made. And the story within this particular story is still really compelling in its own right. Yes, it's a little bit camp and it's a little bit over the top, but it still feels like a genuine, Tales from the Unexpected episode, or, something from the 1970s, where it would be very kind of, serious, and it would be very literary. I mean, the dialogue it's a very dialogue heavy film that they're making here, and a lot of Tales from the Unexpected episodes are written in that way. A lot of, films from the 70s often are very dialogue heavy, and characters having these very intense conversations and interesting discussions. And that's just the aesthetic of the 1970s kind of rubbing off on them. And what's really funny is when the director kind of chimes in, he'd often leave little remarks like, oh yeah, this child actor's not the best child actor in the world, and we tried to get as many people as we could, but this one was just the best that we could find, so we just hired him on the spot. And there's various other things that do kind of, he does kind of bring to light. Let's say, for example, I hate doing food scenes where actors are eating food, because it's very kind of awkward, because the food's cold when it goes down on the mat, and the actors have to literally mime putting stuff, literally have to mime, eating stuff, or they'd have to cut it just right so that they look away just as they're about to put something in their mouth, and then just basically, continue the conversation. And they have to try to talk literally through their eating as well, which is a very awkward thing to do. Ooh, so yeah, little touches like that really added to the overall story. And of course, the production manager, saying that, oh, can we have another take of that? You putting the plate down on the mat thing, in Steve, or something like that. And I thought that was actually really funny. Like they've actually, addressing the actors and saying little things like that. Like it really turns into a behind the scenes thing after a while, and you're thinking, okay, we've got a very bizarre story that's either supernatural or psychological going on, but then we've also got another story which is basically like a behind the scenes thing with the director's commentary going on in the background, and various other shots of cameramen, production managers, people doing hair and makeup and things like that. So what's really going on here? And throughout the course of the episode, there's even a great moment during the production moments where Steve Pemberton's character is the director's commentary basically reveals that the actor playing the father is getting ready to film an advert, and he's basically rushing through his lines to make sure he gets to that particular meeting in time. And that's really funny because the actress playing the mum, I think her name's Katie, she's actually deliberately slowing down her lines. Julian, that's the name of the father. Yes, that's it, because she says a great line in that scene that I've just mentioned about him wanting to rush away to do this advert, where she goes, "Brush my hair for me, Julian." And I thought, well, that's actually a really good, very campy, over the top line, but it's actually a really compelling story in its own right. Yes, it's a bit camp and a bit over the top, but it was still enjoyable to me, and I still love watching shows like Tales from the Unexpected, and I especially loved it back in the days when it first got started with Roald Dahl doing the introduction speeches, because honestly Roald Dahl's one of those writers who, even though he's a little bit problematic, I still feel like even when you hear him speak, he still has that storyteller voice. You can still hear he can make anything sound interesting. He could make the act of watching paint dry seem compelling, and that's what I think is really incredible about him as a writer and as a storyteller. So I loved those segments of Tales from the Unexpected, and I do love the later episodes, but it doesn't feel the same. Kind of something is missing when Roald Dahl isn't there anymore, and you can clearly tell why that is, because not only did they run out of original material from him to work with, but they also kind of felt like, well, he's dead. He died during the later seasons of the show, so they couldn't bring him back, obviously, because he's dead. So that was very sad. But the episode pretty much hints that there is something much more sinister going on. That in the actual story itself, there's a scene where she's told by Julian to take her pills, and she deliberately throws her own pills, what we think initially is her own pills, down the drain, because she doesn't want to, she feels like she has a rational and clear head on her, so she knows that she's not insane. She knows that there's something weird going on in this chalet, but her husband Julian won't hear a word of it. He's kind of like, I don't know whether this was intentional or an intentional reference at all from Pemberton and Shearsmith, but the way Julian looks, it kind of made me think of Donald Sutherland, John Baxter in Don't Look Now. Just the way he looks, like the way his moustache is and the way his hair's combed, it kind of gave me that impression, like this was kind of like their send up of a Don't Look Now or something like that. But and it is kind of very similar in the sense that it's about supernatural goings on, about children in danger and things like that, and the occult and things like that. So there is a lot of references to those sorts of themes in this particular episode. But as the series goes on, it begins to get a little bit more clearer as to what's actually going on, because when the grandmother and the son decide to leave with the caretaker played by Reece Shearsmith, he decides that they decide to basically stay the night, and there's a huge storm up in the chalet. And Julian decides to there's this really good scene where he's trying to shut the window, and he draws the curtains, and the snow's literally coming in, but it just stops when he basically draws the curtains, or he basically tries to shut the curtains, but you can clearly tell that the curtains are not closed, and the sound effect just stops, and the snow just starts coming in. It's really funny. Little details like that really add to the, cheesiness of this particular episode, and you can really tell that Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton were really, passionate about this particular episode. But then it's revealed that, something else is going on here, and I don't really want to reveal too much about the plot because, there is a lot more to this particular episode than meets the eye, and it is actually a really fun episode, aside from the ending. And the ending is one of those things where I kind of found myself, literally my jaw dropped, because I thought it was such a fun episode, such a camp episode, such an over-the-top episode from that point, from the very start onwards, because we've had this very fun, little jab at, the incorrect wine colour. And there's even a great scene where the wife gets hysterical and Steve Pemberton's character just slaps her. And it's clearly a fake slap. You can tell because he really mistimes his flicking his hand across her face, but the effect still goes off even before he's meant to make contact with her face. So you can tell it's one of those over-the-top theatrical slaps. And you can hear the production manager just go off behind the scenes. Can we do that take again, please, Steve? Can we do that slap again, please, Steve? And stuff like that just really makes it fun to watch and really interesting and really kind of laugh out loud funny in places. But then the ending just kind of throws you through a loop and makes you think, wow, I did not expect it to go in this direction. And I really loved it for that, because it really just kind of threw me off and made me really uncomfortable afterwards. And if you see the episode, The Devil of Christmas, episode 1, series 3, I would say I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to go and take a 3-hour shower afterwards, because I certainly felt like I wanted to. That was one of those endings where I felt like, wow, I did not expect them to take this sort of direction. But that's The Devil of Christmas. I've spent a lot more time on this episode, more than I would like to, but I just wanted to give you a lay of the lands of what to look out for in regards to what you'll see in that particular episode. But be wary that the twist is actually kind of a bit of a bait and switch. But it's a fun one. It's an interesting one, not a fun one, but an interesting one. But yeah, that's The Devil of Christmas. And moving on to The Bill. I've actually wasted a good amount of time on talking about the Devil of Christmas alone. This is really going to be a long video if we're at this rate. But yes, let's talk about The Bill. This episode focuses on a group of friends, one of which is played by sorry, I can't see a thing. One of which is played by Philip Glenister. His name is Greg. He's an out-of-towner, and they're trying to treat him to a meal after badminton. But now we're at the very difficult decision of who pays the bill. But it's not simply a fact of who wants to pay the bill, of who, can't pay the bill or who insists on paying the bill. People really want to pay the bill, and that they don't know quite what to do. And this was actually lifted from a real conversation or a real incident that happened for Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton, where they just basically were in a restaurant and they could overhear a family discussing who should pay the bill and who insists on paying the bill and all these other things. And this episode is just so funny and insane because of how dedicated these guys are to proving that they can pay the bill, how much money they have, and all these other things. And people can think you're kind of, tight-fisted if you kind of don't insist on paying the bill, and if you are insisting on paying the bill, you're kind of a little bit of a freeloader. And that's something that really is kind of an interesting thing to bring up. And I feel like the episode did a very good job of just basically using this setup to really kind of have these actors bounce off of each other and really kind of have these great dialogue moments. And the dialogue in this episode is really good. There's even a great I think one person calls the other a blue-faced wanker, and he goes, "It means you're a tight-fisted arsehole." And then Philip Glenister basically goes, "Oh, that's a good one, I'll use that." Like, little lines like that really do add to the to the humour of the episode. But the whole entire thing is just basically these guys taking the act of paying the bill at a restaurant to an absolute high. And I actually felt sorry. And initially, I felt sorry for the waitress because she was the only one there at the restaurant, and I kept thinking to myself, she really needs to close up, guys. Can we just wrap this up? Like, can someone just decide to pay the bill or put it on a tab or something, or create a tab so that you can pay it back in installments or something like that? Like, just come to a decision, because this poor woman clearly doesn't own the place. She clearly just works there, and her boss wants to have the restaurant closed. She even has to call her boss halfway through her shift and say, they still haven't paid the bill and things like that. So I actually really did feel sorry for her until the twist happens. And the twist is a good one but it also kind of threw me through a loop as well. Like, what really was the end game there? Like, are they all, are they all kind of, terrible people? But yeah, it really did bring a light to what people are willing to do to get what they want. And it's actually quite a sinister ending, but it's also really kind of darkly, it's also really kind of funny as well. But it's a good episode, and that's the build. And I'm going to be moving on quickly to the riddle of the Sphinx. This episode follows Nina, a university student or a 20-something-year-old who stumbles into the study in a Oxford University of a well-known professor by the name of Nigel Squires, who is very well known for making crosswords. And this episode was basically inspired by Steve Hilton's love of crosswords. In fact, he would write crosswords for fun every so often in his youth, and he pretty much, included a lot of them in newspapers, and he even put this crossword that's featured in this episode in a newspaper to hint at, the events of the upcoming episode. And this episode starts off because the character of Nina kind of starts off as someone who doesn't seem very bright, and he starts to give her clues. Like, he would use a phrase like, lame swallows fly across a shady desert or something along those lines. And it's the phrase that you need to be looking at the words for, and it really just kind of spirals from there. And the majority of the episode is just these two very interesting minds. Nina is obviously a character who, from the beginning, we think is not that very bright person, but as she starts to get the rhythm and the rhyme of how, crosswords work, it starts to dawn on her that, oh yeah, I get how you do this now. And she starts to develop a little bit of intelligence of her own, and that's something that was very nice to see. It was nice to see a character who isn't really all that bright to begin with start to develop, a certain sense of understanding and getting it right off the bat. And it starts to turn into, very quickly, a very bizarre game of one's life. And it really does become quite an insane ride. This episode is really good because it really gets you thinking. I grew up, watching shows like, Deal or No Deal or Countdown, and my mum would often, watch Countdown. In fact, when we got Sky Plus for the very first time, she would watch Countdown, and she would pause after all the letters were in place and all the numbers were in place and the answer was given and the target was given, so that she could work out the sums and work out the arrangement of the words and how many words she could make from just a few select letters. And I thought that was very interesting. So if you're a fan of Countdown, or you're a fan of someone who, or if you have watched Countdown with someone else who's much more, savvy with numbers and letters, then I would highly recommend watching this episode with someone like that, because it is a really fun episode to watch and try to figure out all the clues and how everything fits together. And it's also just a really funny and really dark episode, very tightly written as well. This is actually a really well written episode. And I'm going to be moving on very quickly to the fourth episode, because this is already 20 minutes long and I shouldn't have wasted so much time talking about The Devil of Christmas. I apologise for that, but I just had a lot to say. That's why offered originally to do it as its own video, because I felt like there was so much to talk about with that episode. I probably should have just gone on with my instinct and probably just, recorded it separately, because this video is already getting long. So yeah, I'm moving on to that's The Riddle of the Sphinx, and definitely check it out. The next episode is called Empty Orchestra. And it's about a group of friends who are spending the night. They're basically office workers, and they are spending the night celebrating the promotion of a newbie played by Steve Pemberton. Excuse me, I'm forgetting names left, right, and centre here. But the episode begins with them sort of celebrating the promotion of Steve Pemberton's character, and they start to have a karaoke night in this one karaoke booth that they've hired for a few hours. And throughout the night, throughout the numbers, we are introduced to each and every single character individually, and they choose songs based on how they're feeling. They use songs to basically express their emotions, and the subtext of the episode is pretty much delivered through the episode through these songs. So it's probably the first time in Inside Number 9's run initially to do a musical themed episode, and all the songs pretty much have a certain level of depth to it. Like the song "Don't You Want Me Baby" is obviously a means of two characters flirting with each other. There's even the song "I Know Him So Well," which is sung by two women who love the same man. And there's even a character by the name of Janet, who is played by a real-life deaf actress, so I have to look up her name. Hold on a minute. Emily Howlett, and she's a real-life deaf actress. And it was such an incredible episode just to see the world from her point of view. And there's this really beautiful scene where she's listening to, she's watching all the other people in her office space have fun and enjoy singing on the karaoke, making a fool of themselves. And, she's smiling, but she's a little bit, quiet and reserved. But then she puts her hands up to the speaker, and she starts to, she feels the pulse, the beat, and then she starts to bob her head, like she starts, really start to listen to the beat and get into the music. And it was actually a really nice scene to see, because very few episodes, especially with something like Inside Number 9, representation, especially with people with disabilities and visual or auditory or any kind of impairments or hearing impairments, do tend to get the bare minimum addressed. But when you actually get an actress or an actor who is in that particular role, and you get to see the world through their eyes and how they absorb things and how they see the world, it's a very nice thing to see. And there's this wonderful romance that she has, a wonderful unrequited romance with a guy named Dwayne, who is dressed as Michael Jackson. And he's actually a very nice guy. He's very nice to her. He can do sign language and things like that. But he doesn't know that she really likes him. So one character by the name of Connie, who is having an affair with Shearsmith's character, and they're all in fancy dress, by the way. Like, Dwayne's dressed as Michael Jackson, as I've said. So Janet is meant to be Boy George. Reece Shearsmith's a sumo wrestler. Connie is a Winehouse, and Stevie from Miranda is Fran. Sarah Hadlock is Britney Spears, and they have a good time. They have a good laugh, but the songs are kind of a way of them expressing themselves without giving too much away, and that's what I really love. Like, I love when Connie does her set of I Know Him So Well, her portion of the song. She starts to show a longing for Reece Shearsmith that really actually kind of feels very tragic. Yes, that doesn't give you the right to go and cheat on someone, especially your best friend, but with your best friend's husband. But that still kind of made you think, oh, there is actually a little bit of a soul there, even though technically she's not a very nice person. She's not a very nice person Janet, but they get theirs in the end. And that's one of the best things about this episode, is it's just a fun episode. It's just such a really great, palette cleanser for all the very bleak stuff that you see throughout the course of Inside Number 9, and especially after the Devil of Christmas, which happens to have a very happy, very kind of nice, light-hearted romp, and it has a very dark twist. This one has a very nice runtime, a very smooth runtime throughout, and it even ends with one of my favourite Sia songs, Titanium, being played to close us out, and it's so wonderful. And that scene where Janet and Dwayne finally get together, oh, my heart hit me right in the feels. It really did. It was so nice. And that's called Empty Orchestra, and that's meant to be lifted from the karaoke phrase, which if you the Japanese phrase, which if you say it, literally it means empty orchestra. So that's where the title Empty Orchestra comes from. Okay, quickly moving on, because we're getting to 30 minutes now and it shouldn't be this long. We move on to Diddle, Diddle, Dumpling. And this follows Shearsmith and Keely Hawkes, who, if you don't know who Keely Hawkes is, she was in The Bodyguard. She was also I think she was in Line of Duty as well, but don't quote me on that. Let me know in the comments if she was in Line of Duty. That's your homework for today, commenters. She's in this, and I mostly know her as the voice of Lara Croft in games like Lara Croft Legend and Anniversary, and she's a good actress. And of course you know who she is when at the moment she opens her mouth. You say, "Oh, that's Lara Croft." Oh, that's the Prime Minister or the Secretary from The Bodyguard. But yeah, she's a great actress, and the basic premise of this episode is Reece Shearsmith's character David finds a shoe, a size 9 shoe, that's left outside his door, and he basically starts to go on this very obsessive crusade to try and find its twin. And at first, you're thinking, this is such a surreal idea for an episode, because he goes through such insane lengths to get to find this other twin half of his of this shoe. But as the story goes on, and there is a twist which I won't reveal, you begin to sort of see why he is so obsessed with this, and it's actually really sad. I kept thinking to myself, oh, that's actually really heartbreaking. I feel bad for laughing at the amount of times he kind of was so obsessed with doing it. And when he gets the owner back, the owner of the shoe back, he kind of feels very heartbroken that he has to give up this thing that he almost considers to be his child at this point. I thought, what's wrong with you, mate? It's a shoe. And yeah, we're all kind of doing kind of David's wife thing here, where we're kind of going, it's just a bloody shoe, and things like that. It's wonderful. It really is. No, sorry, my screen's gone blank. I will get it up quickly, and we will move on to the final episode. The final episode. So that's Diddle Diddle Dumpling. It's a great episode. Don't be fooled by appearances. It's actually a really good episode, so go and check it out when you can. And the final episode, I do apologise for the length of this video in advance, by the way, because I shouldn't have spent too much time focusing on the Devil of Christmas. I do apologise if you find that section to be too long. But we're now on to the final episode, which is called Private Viewing, in which a young artist has basically died, and a group of random guests are invited to the grand opening of his extreme arts exhibition. But throughout the course of the evening, these strange characters, who seem to have no relation to each other in a direct relative sense, begin to get picked off one by one by a gloved killer. And this, I don't know if Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton actually actively got inspiration from this particular genre, but it reminded me a lot of the Italian giallo genre, which is basically in reference to whenever these mysteries and suspense stories were published back in Italy in the 1970s or 1960s, they would always have a yellow cover, and the word giallo comes from the Italian for yellow, and that's the title. And Mario Bava very famously, made an entire career out of, those sorts of films. And of course, Dario Argento, a famous Italian horror film director and writer who did films like, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Cat o' Nine Tails, and Profondo Rosso, and Suspiria, and the Three Mothers trilogy, also made a career out of doing the giallo genre for film and television. And this kind of feels like it has a lot of inspiration from that. A lot of the characters are kind of, a bit, they come from all different sorts of walks of life. And it's really funny, it's very, absurd, but it's also really creepy and really unsettling. And of course, it is a mystery, so you are kind of constantly being kept on your toes of who could it be. There's a lot of references to Kenneth Williams, and Fiona Shaw in this was fantastic. I mean, Fiona Shaw, whenever she shows up in something, whether it's Three Men and the Little Lady, or whether it's Harry Potter, or even if it's, True Blood or something along those lines, whenever I see her in something, I'm always very happy because she's always so good. She always brings her A game to every performance that she's in. But she actually does a very good job of being the semi-comedic relief in this episode, because she just really kind of just doesn't get... You kind of are led to believe that she's in shock because she's seeing all these horrible things. And she's just kind of using humour to kind of protect herself from it. But there are times when you just think, snap out of it. You're in a very serious situation, love. Like, this isn't the time to be making jokes and bad impressions of Kenneth Williams, for goodness sake. But then the twist happens, and it's very kind of insane and crazy, but it's also a lot of fun. So I would highly recommend private viewing. It's a great send up of the giallo genre, and in fact there's a lot of homages in this particular series. I think that the theme of homage is a very keen theme in this particular episode, but also the theme of karma is also very constant, especially in the themes of, the Devil of Christmas and the Riddle of the Sphinx and Empty Orchestra. There is always a degree of karma and people getting what's coming to them, and if you keep on believing, a dream that you wish will come true, to quote a famous Disney film. But yes, that was private viewing, and that was my entire breakdown and overview of Series 3. Series 4 will be coming very shortly, but in the meantime, hope you like this video, and if you want to see more, click on the J icon in the description and you will get taken straight to my channel. And if you've liked this video, please give it a like and share it around. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed this video and have a very good day. Bye.